All right, so today we're really going to dig into this whole Marvin Harrison Jr. situation. And wow, I could tell you guys are just as eager as I am to really unpack this whole thing.
Understandably so, right?
I mean, we're talking about a guy who was on track to be a real game changer, the kind of player you build a franchise around.
Oh, absolutely. You don't see that kind of raw talent come along every day, especially with his lineage. Everyone had him pegged as a cornerstone player, and for good reason.
Yeah, it's not every day you see a prospect with that kind of potential and then, bam, concussion protocol.
Ah,
I think everyone kind of felt that record scratch moment, right? Like,
sure.
wait,
Yeah.
what just happened?
I know. It's like the phrase that makes every fan hold their breath for a second, and for
Exactly.
good reason, too, because thankfully we're long past the days of just shaking it off and getting back out there.
Right, right. It's a whole different ball game now. And I think most fans understand that the NFL is taking concussions way more seriously these days, but what does that actually look like in practice? I mean, it can't be as simple as handing them an ice pack and telling them to walk it off.
Oh, not even close. We're talking about this really intense multi-step process. Like, they bring in these independent neurological consultants. These are people whose entire job is to make sure the player is healthy, not to rush them back onto the field.
Which, let's be honest, there are probably times when teams really wish they could do just that, especially when it's a key player, right? Like, just get him back out there for a few plays.
Oh, or for sure. You know there are some coaches out there thinking that. But this protocol really underscores how seriously the NFL is taking head injuries, which is a good thing. I mean, we've seen what happens when players get pushed back onto the field before they're ready, and the results are, well,
Yeah, not good. Definitely some hard lessons learned there.
absolutely. We're talking about potentially life-altering conditions, lasting neurological damage, early onset dementia, chronic pain. Those are risks you can't just brush aside.
Right, this isn't just about their career, it's about their life after football.
Yeah.
So where does this leave Harrison Jr. right now? What's the next step for him in this whole process?
So right now, he's in the hands of the medical experts going through this whole battery of tests and evaluations. They're going to be looking at everything: cognitive function, balance, coordination, and the biggest factor here, time. They won't clear him to play until he's passed every single test, and that's a process you can't rush.
And that has to be tough for him, for the fans. Everyone was so excited to see him play. It's a real roller coaster of emotions.
It really is. You have this incredible talent facing a major setback right when he was about to hit the big time. But on the flip side, it really highlights how the NFL is evolving its approach to player safety, which is a big deal.
Okay, I have to ask, and you know there are fans out there wondering the same thing. How much does something like this, even with the protocol and everything, how much does it impact a player's draft stock?
That is the million-dollar question, right? It's something that keeps those GMs up at night. It's all about finding that balance between the uncertainty in the short term and the investment you're making for the long haul.
So you've got this curveball thrown into the mix, a concussion, even with all the right protocols in place. What are scouts really zeroing in on in these kinds of situations?
Well, they're looking for those telltale signs, right? Is this just a one-time thing, a bit of bad luck, or is it maybe a sign of something more? Like, how's the player handling the recovery process? Are they engaged, taking it seriously, or are they kind of dismissive of the medical advice? It's not just about the physical healing, it's about mental toughness, that commitment to long-term health.
Which, in a way, this whole thing kind of gives Harrison Jr. a chance to show what he's made of. Like we were saying earlier, it's bigger than just getting back on the field. It's about how you handle the setbacks, right?
100%. And that's something NFL teams are really starting to understand, sometimes the hard way. Rushing a player back before they're truly ready, it backfires. Not just for the player, but for the entire team's success. It's a ripple effect.
You mentioned earlier how much the NFL's stance on concussions has changed, even in the past few years. What's behind that shift, besides, obviously, the ethical stuff? There's got to be
Well,
more to it.
yeah, it's a lot of things coming together. Medical professionals, researchers, they're finally getting the resources and the attention to really share what they're finding about head injuries and the long-term impact.
And those findings are, well, they're pretty hard to ignore at this point.
Exactly. We're talking about studies that definitively link repeated concussions with, CTE,
Hmm.
chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It's a degenerative brain disease, and it's showing up in athletes, especially those with a history of these kinds of impacts. It's been a wake-up call, and not just for the NFL either, but for sports in general, from high school on up.
Right. It's like this whole chain reaction. And then you've got the legal battles, too, right? I mean, the NFL has had some pretty high-profile lawsuits over how concussions were handled in the past.
Absolutely, yeah. Millions and millions of dollars in settlements to players who are now dealing with the consequences, these debilitating conditions directly tied to their time on the field. And those lawsuits, as controversial as some of them were, they forced the NFL to take a long, hard look in the mirror. Like, this is the human cost of the sport, and it's something they can't just sweep under the rug.
It's almost like this perfect storm, right? The medical evidence is undeniable, the legal pressure is mounting, and just a general shift in how we think about concussions, like society as a whole is starting to get it.
Yeah, it's multi-layered for sure. But the bottom line is we're seeing a more cautious approach, a more, dare I say, compassionate approach to how players are treated. And that's a good thing.
So for our listeners out there, how do we follow Harrison Jr.'s situation in a way that's, well, responsible? What should we be paying attention to, aside from just the headlines and the highlight reels?
I'd say the first thing is pay attention to how the team is communicating. Are they being upfront about his recovery? Are they giving regular updates? Or are they being vague, avoiding the issue?
Because those little things, they speak volumes about a team's values, don't they?
100%. You want to see that they're putting the player's health first, even if it means being overly cautious, even if it means keeping him off the field longer than some fans might want.
Because those actions, they say a lot more than words sometimes, especially in high-stakes worlds like the NFL.
Right. And it's not even just about what they say, it's how they say it. Are they talking about him with respect, with genuine concern, or do you sense that undercurrent of, get back out there as soon as possible? Fans can pick up on that stuff if they're paying attention.
Because like you were saying before, this is bigger than just the physical part of the injury. It's about the mental and emotional well-being of the player, too.
Exactly. And that's something I think we as fans need to keep in mind as this whole thing plays out. It's a human story at the end of the day.
Okay, so we're watching how the team is communicating, their actions, their tone. What else should we be looking at as this unfolds?
I'd say keep an eye on who steps up in his place. Oftentimes, these kinds of setbacks, as unfortunate as they are, they open the door for someone else to shine. You might see a backup receiver suddenly come alive, a tight end taking on a bigger role, things like that.
Which can be exciting, especially for those of us who love those underdog stories, right?
For sure. It's like that hidden potential just waiting for the chance to break out. And it really highlights how important a team's depth is, that ability to adapt on the fly and overcome those challenges. That can really make or break a season.
And sometimes those breakout players, they change the whole dynamic, even in ways no one expected.
Exactly. It's so true. So yeah, while it's natural to feel that void when a player like Harrison Jr. is out, it's also a chance to appreciate the resilience of the sport itself. How other players rise to the occasion and surprise us. It's part of what makes it so compelling to watch.
It reminds us that the NFL season, it's a marathon, not a sprint. How you adapt, overcome those inevitable hurdles, that's often what separates the contenders from the pretenders.
Well said. Couldn't agree more.
There's one more layer to this whole thing that I think we should touch on, something we haven't really dug into yet.
Oh, I'm all ears. What's on your mind?
What does this all mean for the future of the game itself? And I'm not just talking about player safety, but like the fundamental way football is played. Is that changing?
Ooh, that's a big one. And honestly, it's a question a lot of people are asking right now. It's a conversation that needs to happen.
I mean, we're already seeing some pretty big rule changes, right? All in the name of making the game safer. But is it enough? Like, down the road, will we see even bigger changes, maybe even to how the game is played at its core?
It's not outside the realm of possibility. There are some people, some real experts in the field, who believe that to truly eliminate the risk, you'd have to fundamentally change the game. We might even be talking about moving away from tackling altogether.
Wow. Okay, that's a big one. I get why they're saying it, but that would be a huge shift for fans, for players, for the whole league.
No question. You got to remember, football, it's always been about those collisions. That's part of what makes it so exciting to watch, right? But there's no getting around it. When you've got these incredible athletes moving at full speed, that force, it takes a toll.
It really makes you think, what does the future hold for football? Will it evolve into something, I don't know, almost unrecognizable to us today?
Yeah.
Or can you keep that essence of the game, the heart of it, while still protecting the players?
Man, those are the million-dollar questions right there. And there are no easy answers. It's this constant push and pull between tradition, entertainment, and the health of the athletes who are putting their bodies on the line for us.
And we can't forget, those athletes, they're more than just names on a jersey, right? They're sons, fathers, brothers, friends.
People with their own lives, their own hopes and dreams that go way beyond the game.
Exactly. So as we watch this whole thing with Harrison Jr., as we see how he recovers and, root for him to get back out there, I think it's important to remember that.
I couldn't agree more. It's a good reminder that every player, no matter how talented, how famous they are, they deserve to be treated with respect. We should be concerned about their well-being, first and foremost.
Maybe, just maybe, this whole thing will get people talking. And not just about concussions, but about what kind of future we want for football.
Yeah, a future where you can have all the amazing athleticism, the competition, the thrills, but where it's done in a way that protects the players, where their health is a priority.
Well, we always like to leave our listeners with something to think about.
A little something to chew on. I like it.
Exactly. So here's your food for thought today. If you could redesign football, knowing everything we know now about the risks, the long-term effects of injuries, how would you change it? What would your ideal version of the game look like?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a question I hope every fan out there really sits down and considers.
Because at the end of the day, the sports we love, they reflect our values. What we choose to celebrate, what we choose to protect, it says something about who we are. And maybe, just maybe, by having these tough conversations, by asking these hard questions, we can shape a future for football that's both exciting and sustainable. A future where players can chase their dreams without putting their health on the line.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been fantastic. Really appreciate your insights on this.
Anytime. Happy to be here.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions and keep digging deeper. You never know what you might find.